He heard the crowd before he saw what it had cornered. That low, ugly building sound a frightened town makes when it has decided to be brave all at once against something smaller than itself. Reese Monroe reined his horse up short at the head of the street and saw a woman backed against the wall of the feed store, with her chin high and a ring of men closing on her. And he did not stop to weigh it, because there was nothing in him that needed weighing. She was Shoshone. That was plain from her fringed hide dress and the quill work at the yoke and the 2 dark braids, and it was plainer still from the words the men were throwing at her. Words about her people and a horse run off 2 nights back and cattle gone from the Dennett Range. Words that wanted only a body to land on and did not much care whose. She had come in alone, they said, bold as brass, to trade at the store, and that was proof enough for men who had already made up their minds. She's one of them that raided Dennett, a thick-necked man was saying, and I say we hold her till the buck that runs with her comes to fetch her, and then we hang the both. That's enough. Reese stepped his horse into the ring, and the animal's shoulder moved the front rank back whether they liked it or not. He swung down slow and put himself between the woman and the crowd, his back to her, his hands open and low, and away from the rifle in his saddle scabbard, because a man who wanted to stop a killing did not start by reaching for a gun. Now which of you saw her at Dennett? Not heard. Saw. Silence. The thick-necked man colored. She's Shoshone. That's not an answer to what I asked. Reese kept his voice flat and carrying, the voice he used on green cattle at the edge of a stampede. I ride line for the Dennett outfit. I was there the morning after. Whoever cut that fence rode shod horses and left boot sign, and this woman's got neither. You want to hang somebody for it. You'll want the right somebody, or you'll answer to the law and to your own souls both. He let his eyes go around the ring, man to man, giving each one a chance to be the first to remember he was a person and not a mob. Go home. It's near dark. Go home to your suppers and let this woman be. Behind him, he heard her breathing, steady, and he was glad of that, because a woman who kept her head was a woman he could get out of this alive. The crowd did not break all at once. Mobs never do. But the thick-necked man had no witness and no answer, and one by one the others found reasons their wives wanted them home, and the ring came apart at the edges the way rope frays, until there was only the thick-necked man left, and then not even him. Reese stood in the emptying street until the last of them had gone, and only then did he turn to her. She was younger than he'd thought, and steadier than any woman had a right to be, after what she'd just stood through. She looked at him with dark, level, measuring eyes. Not the eyes of a rescued thing, but the eyes of a person taking the exact measure of a stranger. You should not have done that, she said, in English, careful and clear. Now they will say you ride with the raiders too. Let them say it. Reese picked up the small bundle of trade goods she'd dropped and held it out to her, and after a moment she took it, her fingers not quite touching his. You got a horse? Behind the store. They would not let me reach it. Then let's get you to it, before somebody's supper gets at quick, and they come back with more nerve than sense. He walked her around the building, keeping his own body between her and the street, and he did not crowd her, or take her arm, or do any of the things a man might do to a woman he thought helpless, because it was already clear to him she was not, and something in him respected that too much to pretend otherwise. Her pony was a good one, a spotted mare with a soft eye. She swung up onto it the way water moves, all of a piece, and looked down at him. Why? She asked. You do not know me. Didn't need to know you, Reese said. Knew them. He put his hat back on. Ride safe. Keep to the timber past the ford. If any man troubles you, you tell him Reese Monroe said you'd nothing to do with Dennett, and if he doesn't like it, he can come find me and say so. She studied him one moment longer, and something in the level dark eyes shifted, some small door coming open the width of a hair. Sana, she said. I am called Sana. It is not a thing I give to men in the street. And then she was gone into the dusk, up toward the timber, and Reese Monroe stood alone in the empty road with his heart going harder than the whole thing seemed to warrant. He did not expect to see her again. That was the truth he told himself, for the 4 days it took him to be wrong. She came to the line camp at dusk, alone, on the spotted mare, and she sat her horse at the edge of the firelight until he stood and showed his empty hands. "You said Reese Monroe," she said. "So I have come to Reese Monroe. There is a thing you should know." She did not dismount. The men who raided Dennett were not my people. They were white men with their faces blacked, driving stolen cattle north to sell, and they meant for the blame to fall where it always falls, on us. My father's scouts followed the sign, "We have the cattle." My father would return them, to show the truth of it, but he does not trust that a white town will let his riders live long enough to explain. She looked at him steadily across the fire. "You stood in the street for a woman you did not know. My father would speak with a man like that, if you have the courage for it." Reese was quiet a moment, feeling the size of what she was asking, and the size of the trust folded inside it. "Your father," he said. "Who's your father?" "Tsana." "He is the one the soldiers call the war chief," she said simply. "Among our people, he is only my father. Both are true." Reese Monroe had ridden a lot of country and done a lot of hard things, but he had never in his life been invited into a war chief's camp by the man's own daughter, and he understood that a refusal now would close a door that would not open twice. He also understood that riding into that camp on the strength of 4 days' acquaintance was the kind of thing that got a man killed. He looked at Sana across the fire, at the plainness and the pride in her, and he found he trusted her, and he could not have said with his hand on the book exactly why, except that she had told him the truth in the street, when a lie would have served her better, and he had learned young to weigh a person by that. "I'll come," he said. "Let me saddle up." They rode through the night and into the Wind River country, up along the cold rushing water, and into high meadows silvered with early frost, and as they rode, Tsana told him things, a little at a time, testing him with each one the way you test ice before you trust it. She told him her mother had died of the coughing sickness the whites had brought. She told him she had learned English from a trader her father had sheltered through a bad winter, because her father believed a people who did not understand their enemies would be destroyed by them. She told him that she herself did not hate white men, though she had reason enough, because hate was a fire that ate the one who carried it before it ever reached the one it was lit for. "And you?" she asked him. "Why does a white line rider have no fear of my father's camp?" "Got no people of my own," Reese said. "Buried my folks young, back east, came west with nothing. A man with no people learns quick that blood's not the only thing makes a person worth standing by. I judge a body by what they do." He looked over at her in the starlight. "You told the truth in that street, when a lie would have saved your skin. That's all the pedigree I need off anybody." He felt, rather than saw, her look at him a long moment in the dark. The camp took his measure the way he'd known it would. Hard-eyed men rising from the fires, hands near weapons, a wall of silence, as he rode in among them at the war chief's daughter's side. Reese kept his hands loose and his eyes level, and let them look. Tsana spoke to them in the Shoshone tongue, quick and firm, and whatever she said moved the hands away from the weapons, though not the wariness from the eyes. Her father was a tall man gone gray at the temples, with a stillness about him deeper than the mountains behind him, and eyes that had plainly seen the whole arc of what was coming for his people, and had decided to meet it standing. He looked at Reese a long time before he spoke, and when he spoke it was in English, slow and deliberate. "My daughter says you stood in front of a crowd for her, a woman you did not know, and asked them for proof they did not have. Why?" "Because they were wrong, and somebody had to say so out loud," Reese answered. "Weren't brave. Was just the only thing a man could do and still be one." Something moved in the old chief's face, some slight easing that Reese felt more than saw. "There are not many of your people who believe a thing is wrong when it costs them to say it," the chief said. "You will help us return the Dennett cattle. You will ride at the head of my riders, so that no fool with a rifle mistakes their purpose. If they kill you for it, that is a thing you choose tonight, with your eyes open." He paused. "And you will do this because it is right, not for my daughter. A man who does right for a woman will stop when the woman is gone. A man who does right because it is right. Him I can trust with my people's lives." "It's right," Reese said. "I'd do it if she'd never been born." And then, Because he was an honest man, and the old chief had asked for honesty, he added, "But I'll not pretend I'm sorry she was." The war chief looked at him, and looked at his daughter, who had gone still by the fire, and something very old and very tired, and not unkind, passed behind the chief's eyes. "No," he said, "I do not think you are." The drive back was the longest 3 days of Reese Monroe's life. He rode point under the white cloth, and behind him came the Shoshone riders and the cattle, and every mile he knew that all it would take to turn a righteous thing into a massacre was one frightened man with a rifle and a grudge. It nearly happened at the last. As they came down into the flats above the town, a rider broke from a stand of cottonwoods with his carbine already up and leveled. The thick-necked man from the feed store, red-faced, half out of his mind with the certainty that he was watching a raid come down on his town. "Hold." Reese spurred out ahead of every Shoshone gun, straight into the line of the man's rifle, so that to fire on the raiders now, the man would have to fire through him first. He reined up broadside, a plain white line rider in a plain coat, the white cloth snapping on the lance above his head. "Look at it, man. Look. Those are Dennett's cattle, and they're bringing them home. You point that gun one more second, and you'll be the one man in this county who shot the truth dead when it rode up to shake your hand. Now put it down." For a terrible stretch of heartbeats, the carbine did not move, and behind Reese, not one Shoshone rider so much as breathed, holding to their word and to him. Then the barrel wavered and dropped, and the thick-necked man sat his blowing horse and stared at the 200 head of returning cattle like a man waking from a fever. Reese let his own breath out slow. He had put himself in front of a mob for Talina, and now he had put himself in front of a rifle for her people. And he understood, sitting there in the cold morning with his heart slamming, that he had somewhere along the way stopped being able to tell the two things apart. They drove the cattle on down, Reese Monroe riding point under the white cloth on the lance, a dozen Shoshone riders behind him, herding 200 head of Dennett's stock, straight down the main street of the town that had wanted to hang a woman for the theft. The truth of it, seen in daylight, did what no words could have. The black-faced raiders were run down within the week, white men every one, and the town that had closed on Santa in the dusk had the grace, or at least the shame, to look at its own boots when Reese rode past after. He courted her slow, in the way of both their peoples and neither, riding up to the Wind River camp through that autumn and the winter after, always with her father's leave, and always, in time, with something warmer than leave. He learned her language a hard word at a time, and let her laugh at how he mangled it. She learned the run of his line camp and the names of his horses. One bitter night in the deep of that winter, when a storm caught him far up the canyon, and his fingers had gone past feeling on the reins, it was Tana who found him and brought him in, who wrapped his hands in warmed hides and fed him broth from her own bowl, and sat by him without a word until the shivering left him. He had come to that country to save her, or so he'd told himself in the street that first dusk. He lay by her fire that night and understood that the saving had never run only one way, and that he had stopped keeping the account of it, because you did not keep accounts with your own heart. "You did not have to ride out in that storm to find me," he said, low, in the dark. "No," she agreed. "I did not have to stand in that street either. We do not do these things because we must, Reese Monroe. We do them because of who we have decided to be." She was quiet a moment. "I decided some time ago." And when at last he asked her plainly, the way he did everything, sitting beside her on a rock above the cold, loud river, with the aspens gone gold around them. "I've got no people, Tana, and no valley, and half of both our worlds will look sideways at us the rest of our lives. I can't offer you easy. I can offer you true. I'd stand in front of any crowd that ever lived for you, and I'd stand there when it cost me, same as the first day. That's the whole of what I've got." She was quiet a while, watching the water. Then she put her hand over his, dark fingers over weathered brown, freely, an equal's hand and not a captive's. "On the day you stood in the street," she said, "I did not need saving. I would have stood there and died before I ran. What I had never seen, in all my life, was a man of your people who would stand there beside me. That is a rarer thing than a rescue." She turned to look at him, level and dark and unafraid, the same eyes that had measured him in the dusk. "My father says, a man who does right, because it is right, can be trusted with his people's lives. I have watched you a long time now, Reese Monroe. I will trust you with mine." They were married in both ways, in the camp and in the little mission down the valley, and if the country never made it easy, and it did not, it never once made them sorry. Reese Monroe built his home where the two worlds met, at the mouth of the Wind River Canyon, and Sana made it a place where her father's riders and his own outfit both sat at the same fire, which more than one man on both sides had sworn could never happen. In the years that came, when the hard history bore down on her people the way the old chief had always known it would, it was Reese who rode at the head of every honest errand between them and the whites, under a white cloth, because both sides had learned they could trust the word of the man who'd stepped into a mob for a woman he didn't know. And Tana, who had never needed saving, had for the rest of her life the one thing she had truly wanted and never thought to find: a man who would stand beside her, in the open street, in the plain daylight, and never once ask her to be less than the war chief's daughter and wholly her own. She had stood ready to die alone against a wall. She lived, instead, beside a man who had simply refused to let her stand alone. And that, she told her own daughters after, was the truest kind of love there was.